Hey everyone, welcome to Faith and Entrepreneurship. I'm Devin Dickinson here with Lauren today. Today we're going to talk about failure as an entrepreneur. And, probably as I said that, if you're an entrepreneur, you almost got a sick feeling in your stomach. But this is something that we deal with, right? And I really want to break it down, particularly through the lens of the Bible and how we deal with that and how it affects, our faith versus fear. So we're going to jump into this, and I'm going to kick it over to Lauren, and let's go. Lauren, what do you got?
Sounds good, Devin. So yeah, we want to dig in on failure here because it's something every business owner or entrepreneur is going to face, whether it be small setbacks, challenges, or even probably complete failure of a business idea. And so first question I wanted to ask you is just, why do you think failure is such a defining moment for entrepreneurs?
Frankly, because we all have it, right? Like we have it. And sometimes if you really, depending on your perspective, it can happen daily, some are bigger than others, right? But I do believe that understanding and having the right mindset when you have failures, and we're using the word failure, but I think failure probably isn't the right, when we say failure, I'm sure people understand, but I often think of failure as redirection or opportunity.
Okay.
And faith-based folks love to have like little bumper stickers or little things hung in their house that say, faith over fear, and everyone loves to say this. But it's very difficult sometimes to live it, especially as an entrepreneur. And I think when we have these perceived failures in life, you can look at it through two lenses. You can look at it through fear, or you can look at it through faith. And so when you talk about defining moments, I think who we are and where our faith is, like if we're called, if we believe that, listen, I'm doing what God's called me to do, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, which is be an entrepreneur. And I just had a setback.
Yeah.
You can look at that as something that's going to destroy you, or you can look at it as an opportunity. When I very first started in business, one of my first internships that I ever had was making cold calls. Okay. And for those of you who've done cold calls, you understand how brutal it is.
Yeah.
Right. And if you haven't done cold call, I want you to picture it's like 1992 or whatever, and you're sitting there with a phone and a list of people to call, and you make a phone call, and then you bug them during dinner, right?
Yeah.
You're calling them. This is before cell phones, so you're calling them. They're getting up from this dinner table and answering the phone, right? There's no caller ID, so you get to shock them, right?
Yeah.
They don't know who's on the other end. And I was pitching them this to invest with, it was Smith Barney at the time. It was this investment firm, and they had to have a minimum of $25,000. And this is like 1992 or whatever. So you're calling high net worth people during dinner, asking them over the phone, hey, do you have $25,000 you would like to invest?
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of colorful language, that I learned, responses. But what was interesting was we used to call it buying signals, okay? Versus objections, right? So it was funny. It was a mindset, right? And so when people would say things like, oh, well, I already have my money invested here, a lot of people would say, oh, well, thank you very much. Sorry to bother you, ma'am, sir. Have a nice evening. Because they would think that's an objection.
Yeah.
Hang up the phone, on to the next call. But what I was taught is no, every single objection they give you, flip it around as a buying signal. And so the response would be like, oh, well, that's great. I'm really glad that you have that money invested. Sounds like you're a very savvy investor who cares a lot about their finances. Would you care to have a second opinion? Right? So you took something that was a negative and turned it into an opportunity.
Yeah. A failed cold call
Right.
to now it's still
Right.
a potential,
And so that was burned into my mind as I think I was 20 years old at the time, that like, wait a second, you mean every single objection, every single reason not to do business, every single thing that would be a reason to say no is actually a reason to say yes, is actually a buying signal. And so that was kind of burned into me, right? And if you look at the Bible, like, people didn't have smooth lives, right? Like think about the story of Joseph. Like, that dude, like, had a vision for his life at a very young age, 16, 17 years old. He sees himself ruling countries and everyone's going to bow down to him. Maybe he had the wrong attitude, and maybe he was prideful. There's some other stuff, I'm sure, baked into that. But like, he had a vision for his life. And along the way, he ends up getting sold into slavery by his freaking family. Right? And then, like, you'd want to quit. Like, honestly, like, people would probably commit suicide if something that terrible happened. Right? But he's like, well, this is the path that I'm on. And so he takes his path. The next thing you know, he's working as a slave in someone's house. And a lot of people be like, I'm not going to be a slave in somebody's house, and could have a terrible attitude about it. He looked at it as an opportunity, became like the number one in that house, right? Ran everything. Next thing you know, he gets falsely accused and thrown into prison. At that point, you'd be like, God, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Right? If you have fear, you literally would just be throwing the table and be like, the vision I had for my life, it was a delusion, right? It was just wrong. But he looked at that as an opportunity. Next thing you know, he's running the prison. And then he does, then he gives, this opportunity he interprets dreams for two people, and they end up working. One of them was working for the king. And he's like, this is finally my card out. No. That doesn't even get him in. But eventually he ends up becoming more or less the second in command of all of Egypt. And there were so many failures along the way that people would want to throw in the towel. And we all go, oh yeah, I know that story. Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? Like, that's a fun story. No, that's not a story. That's a person's life. Like, that's not some fictitious thing. That's in the Bible. That's a real man who had real struggles, probably worse than any of ours. None of us have been sold into slavery by our family. Yet he took these things and created opportunities in each and every one of them. And that's what I think is the story of entrepreneurialism, is kind of like the story of Joseph, right?
Yeah.
Like, turning, perceived setbacks, failures into these opportunities.
What do you think of the phrase failure is not an option?
Laughable. I think failure, again, I'm going to use the word failure not in the terminal sense, but failure in the obstacle sense, right? I think there are obstacles that happen every day. People can allow an obstacle to become a failure and become a loss and become quitting, right? It can, an obstacle, if you allow it from that fear-based mindset, you can spiral down into ultimately quitting and losing, you're out, right? But obstacles are going to happen daily. So are not an option. I think that's a wrong mindset, because failures, obstacles happen. But having a faith over failure mindset is what's going to get us past those and take the obstacles into opportunities. And so there's this fear that could happen that whenever you have an obstacle could take you down the wrong path. Faith, whenever you have an obstacle, you can see an opportunity in it. People like to say things like, oh, every cloud has a silver lining. And, that's a really nice phrase, right? But like, there's so much truth to it if you allow yourself to see the world through that. One of the big obstacles that most people can relate to is COVID. During COVID, everybody was faced with a giant obstacle. Many companies went out of business during that time. And listen, I know there's, this is not a one size fits all story. I know that. So I don't want to get hate mail or anything for this, right? Like, but also during COVID, a lot of companies had to make some significant adjustments. We were one of them. And we came out the other side of COVID. Both of my companies came out the other side of COVID in a better place than we went in. And believe me, I'm going to tell you, like, Lauren, I struggled with this. I would lie to you if I told you I had nothing but faith this entire time. I had fear. I had sleepless nights. I had anxiety. I struggled during COVID a lot personally. But every day I was faced with the mindset of, is this going to be the end of me, or is this going to be an opportunity for me?
Did you have moments then where you thought, I'm a failure, or this will fail, or
100%.
I don't see how we don't not fail in this?
100%. Absolutely. And so people will think like, oh, well, you know, Devin, you don't know what it's like. 100%. I was literally, you know, role playing every single negative scenario that you could possibly imagine. And just constantly, and there were days, weeks when literally I couldn't get out of the fear, because it was this fear, like this could happen, that could happen, this happened, that happened. And literally, like, I don't even want to tell you the depths of, you know, where my mind went, but it went dark. And so it was this constant battle in my devotional time. And I really I struggled against this. I had to pray against this. And, there was a song during it, Elevation Church had the song about fighting battles, right? Like, this is how I fight my battles. And that was kind of my theme song that I adopted during COVID. And it really helped me to build this faith mindset over this fear mindset. And I say build because it wasn't a transition overnight. It was, I had to build it every single day. And whichever one I fed is which one won. If I fed the fear, it won. If I fed the faith, it won. And so as I learned to adapt to faith and seeing this, you know, huge obstacle, COVID, as an opportunity, I had to change a lot of how I even felt about business. It evolved me as a businessman, and I feel like I came out better on the other side. I made decisions I would have never made before had COVID not challenged me to make those hard decisions. Failure is not an option, I think, is the wrong terminology. What we should say is having a fear-based mindset is not an option. Like, I will not allow that to be an option. I will choose a faith-based mindset. As an entrepreneur, as a faith-based person, I am going to daily choose a faith-based mindset over fear.
So for entrepreneurs listening right now who might be feeling like they've failed, what would you tell them based on your own experience?
We have this opportunity to fail forward, to fall forward, right? Like, and for me, I really believe my life has been like that. There's a story of Joshua, and what happened is Joshua was truly a man of faith. Like, I love Joshua. He's probably my favorite character in the Bible. And the reason is Joshua, people think about Joshua as being the leader going into the promised land. That's what they associate with Joshua. They forget that he's one of the 12 spies, original spies. So before the Israelites take the promised land, you have to rewind 40 years because they had an opportunity to do it 40 years prior. They sent 12 spies into the land. Only 2 of them came back giving a positive report. Caleb and Joshua. The funny thing is, you don't even know the other 10's name because they're insignificant. They came back with a faith-filled report. And they're like, hey, we can take it, right? Like, and what the people are like, yeah, but there's giants in the land, this, that, and the other. And they're like, well, they never said there wasn't giants in the land, right? Caleb nor Joshua never say that there aren't giants there, right? They never say that there's not obstacles. But what they say is, oh, it's filled with fruit and honey, right? It's like abundant land. Like, we want this land, right? Those 2 came back with a faith-based report, the other 10 with the fear-based report. So that's who Joshua was. He was a man that saw the world through faith rather than fear. So Joshua, fast forward, basically God wipes out that entire generation. Nobody gets to go into the promised land for 40 years. Moses unfortunately doesn't get to go into the promised land either. So Joshua now leads into the promised land. So that's the background on Joshua, this faith that he had. So now he leads into the promised land. As he goes into the promised land, he faces obstacles, battles. He fights battle after battle after battle after battle. And he literally, like, there's a chapter in the Bible where it lists out every king that he takes down. And literally, it's his entire life. It's not over like a 2-year period.
Yeah.
It's like his lifespan. So like each time, like there's another battle, another battle, another battle, another battle, right? So his entire life is filled with battles. Well, if you read through it, it says he defeated this king, 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 went after the whole way. And he basically lives his entire life undefeated. And right now you're going, nope, Devin, you're wrong. That's not true. He did lose a battle. Well, he did lose a battle. He lost a battle of Ai, which was a small, little, rinky-dink, crappy little city that they thought they would take out overnight. Well, what happened was they went into the battle, but they didn't consult the Lord. And there was sin in the camp, and they got their butts handed to them. Okay? And so what happened is people go, oh, well, he lost the battle of Ai, so you're wrong, Devin. No. Actually, what happened was he lost the battle of Ai, went back to God and said, God, what did we do wrong? Figured out that there was sin in the camp, eradicated that sin, went back and destroyed Ai. So he literally defeats every single king. And that's what I think our lives can be like, right? It's not without battles. And sometimes it's not even without loss in those battles, right? But it's about going back and evaluating, going, wait, what happened in that loss and how do I move forward? And because Joshua, going back to who he was this man of faith over fear. He saw, instead of giants in the land, he saw opportunity in the land. He had this mindset that he could live an entire life undefeated. And I think that's how we're called to live. And so when we think about, well, Devin, how can you say that? Because I have losses every day. Well, yeah, you have losses every day, but what do you do with that loss? Can you come back and win tomorrow? Because at the end of the day, the scoreboard it's a running scoreboard, right? And we get to find victories in those perceived setback or losses. It's just whether you have the faith mindset or the fear mindset.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I've tried to adopt this in my life. And I think people go and say, well, Devin, that's just you. I do have a predisposition towards, the positive. But this is learned, right? Faith is learned, right? And faith is a disciplined mindset. You have to discipline your mind to see things through faith. And the reason I talk all the time about a daily devotional and time with the Lord every single day is because as an entrepreneur, anyone, you are going to face these battles in your life. And just like I was sharing with COVID, that was a huge battle for me. And if I didn't allow myself to be fed this faith, in the time with the word every day and prayer and worship and reading the Bible, if I didn't allow myself to have that, I was feeding the negative, and that fear would rise up and conquer faith. Right? So remember, this isn't some catchy little thing that you have in your office, faith over fear. That's great. That's a good reminder. But this is something that you have to feed. If you feed fear, it will consume faith. If you feed faith, it will consume fear. And so right now you can say, well, Devin, I struggle with this. Right now I really struggle. Let me encourage you to get in the Word, right? Journal that. See what God is doing in your life. Also, look back historically on what he has done for you. Joshua was able to look back and see what he had done for him. There's also, if you remember, I mentioned 2 names. Remember what they were?
Caleb.
Yeah, Caleb was the other one. Joshua and Caleb. Caleb also had a faith-based mindset because Caleb, we talked about Joshua. Listen to these 2 people. Yeah, Caleb went into the land. They figured he was he wasn't a spring chicken, right? He went into the land, and then he had 40 years out of it, and then he went in and conquered with Joshua all this entire time along Joshua's side. Well, at the end, he goes to Joshua and says, hey, bro, Remember we're, the two faith dudes, right? We're the dudes. He goes, I want to take this land for myself. And Joshua goes, cool, go for it. And Caleb goes, guess what? I'm 85. I think he says he's 85 years. He goes, I'm 85 years old. I'm still as ready for battle as I was back then. Dude, come on, let's be honest. How many 85-year-olds are as ready for battle as they were during 25? Yeah. But what it meant was his faith, his mindset. Mm-hmm. He still had this mindset of faith. He had faith that he was going to go and take this land at 85 years old. And Josh was like, yeah, you're right. I know you. Go for it, dude. And he goes and he takes the land, right? And so there's this idea of going, I want to build a faith, let my faith consume fear mindset. And I would challenge people as an entrepreneur, as anyone who is pursuing their dreams, understand that it doesn't mean that you're not going to have the battles. You are going to have the battles, but you must feed the faith. When your time with your devotional time and your worship time and your prayer time, allowing that faith to consume and overcome and eat the fear is going to make the difference when you overcome an obstacle, and see it as a buying signal, as a positive, as a whatever it is, over this kind of reason to quit, reason to stop. And so this is my challenge to you. Like, this is not how you're born. This is not how you come out of the womb. This is what you feed. Be a Joshua, be a Caleb. Look at that land that probably has giants. Your business, your endeavor right now has issues. I guarantee you right now, as you look at the future, it's not like wide open, blue ocean, perfect, smooth sailing business. It's going to have challenges. But have that Joshua and Caleb mindset and go, yeah, sure, there's some freaking giants there, but we can take them down. But look at the opportunity, because that's how we succeed. That's how we grow. And frankly, that's who you were created to be. That's who you really are on the inside. So feed that. Go out there, conquer those giants, be Joshua, be Caleb. I'm Devin Dickinson. I'm a little worn out after this one because I'm pretty fired up now. And I'm not 85 years old, but I'm 53, and I still have as much energy to go take on those giants and conquer that land as I did when I was 25. So I'm Devin Dickinson. This is the Faith and Entrepreneurship Podcast, and I hope this has inspired you to pursue your dreams.